Well, welcome everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, and welcome to the Aero Club of Northern California's prestigious Scholarship Award ceremony. My name is AJ Brade. I'm the treasurer of the Aero Club of Northern California, and I'll be conducting tonight's introduction and then passing the baton off to my fellow board members who will progress through the program. As is traditional, I'd like to introduce the Boy Scouts from Troop 170 in San Jose, who will be presenting the colors through a pre-recording. Senior Patrol Leader Kevin Yu of Troop 170 will lead the Pledge of Allegiance following the posting of the colors. I'll hand it over to Kevin.
Attention. Color guard, advance. Troop flute. You color sound off. Color guard, please post the colors.
Okay, so if you're a member of the military or a veteran, please salute. Otherwise, put your right hand over your heart. Audience salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice for all.
Thank you, Kevin. And while you still have your arm over your heart, please raise a glass to the west. I'd like to offer a toast to all the aviators who have gone west. Some notable mentions are Chuck Yeager and Ellsworth Getchell. So please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. As you may know, this year is quite different. Although our annual dinner may have been canceled, our mission has not. I'm grateful to everybody who's made this night possible. They've contributed countless hours of their time to ensure that our award recipients, our Crystal Eagle awardees and scholarship recipients will get the recognition they deserve. Eric's going to be putting a link on the chat box to the scholarship below, so keep an eye out for that. Today we have our guest speaker, Jim Clarkson. You can wave when I call your name. We got Jennifer Maglick, Marcus Espinoza, and Julia Bradley. Those are our three scholarship recipients. Let me dive into a little bit of the background about the Aero Club. The Aero Club was formed to promote those activities which advance aviation and aerospace within Northern California. We are a chapter of our parent organization, the NAA, the National Aeronautic Association, which had been founded in 1905 as the Aero Club of America. It is the oldest independent nonprofit aviation organization in the United States. So central to aviation was the Aero Club that actually in 1926, it issued all pilot's licenses in the United States. The first 5 pilot's licenses were issued to Glenn Curtis, Lieutenant Frank Lamb, Louis Paulum, Orville Wright, and Wilbur Wright. Until 1926, all other pilot's licenses issued in the United States subsequent to these 5 were issued by the Aero Club of America. We embrace the goals of our parent organization in our efforts to support a vigorous aviation and space program for students of all levels, and to recognize and honor those who have made outstanding contributions to the advancement of aviation and space flight. Next, I want to recognize our members, everybody that's here. I want to thank all of our members and all the folks who've donated to our various scholarship funds. Without you, none of this would have been possible. I can see the impact, the confidence, the financial support, and the recognition of past awardees. And I can proudly say that your contribution is a building block in many of these young aviators and their early careers. If you'd like to make a donation, I'll link the link in the website to the chat box, and you can also mail your donation to the San Jose Reed Hill View address at 2500 Cunningham Avenue in San Jose. We're always on the lookout for new members, so if you or somebody you know might be interested, please have them visit our website and register to become a member. Throughout the years, we've had some pretty amazing speakers who volunteered their times and also gave some very informative presentations. I'd like to take this opportunity now to introduce our board to you. So to keep this moving, I'll call out some names, and if you're here, please do wave at the camera. We have Eric Peterson, Walt Geiger, Johnny Kavigas, Pam Sverdlin, Max Trescott, Ron Blake, Scott Yellick, Ray Hutchins, Sharon Sweeney, Anita Ferris, Marty Blaker, Michelle Tripp, and Richard Bandy. Thank you, board members. Throughout this past year, we've solely used video conferencing so that board members do not have to brave Bay Area traffic or the pandemic to participate. I say this because we're always looking for new board members to help participate. All you need is 2 hours a month, a computer with a microphone and camera, and you too can be in the room helping us make some very important decisions that contribute to the operation of our organization. If you'd like to get involved, please reach out to myself or another board member, and we can get that started. Moving on, another one of our prime directives of the club, as you may know, is to honor the upcoming aviation professionals. These are students who are pursuing a career in aviation, exemplify traits of a future aviation leader. Once again, we get to present 3 $2,000 scholarships to 3 outstanding individuals. At this time, I'm going to hand the baton off to Pam, and she'll start the scholarship award process. Pam, over to you.
Thank you, AJ. First off, I would like to introduce Jennifer Maglick. Jennifer is a U.S. Navy veteran. She served from 2000 to 2005 as a radar and missile systems technician aboard the USS Ronald Reagan. She is currently studying at the College of Alameda for her associate's degree. Jennifer holds an FAA airframe mechanic certificate and will be testing this month for her power plant mechanic certificate. She is working towards her goal of a bachelor's degree in mechanical or aeronautical engineering. Her prior education was funded by the GI Bill, which expired for her at the end of 2020. This scholarship will help fund her associate's degree at the College of Alameda. Jennifer has dreams of working for the US Air Force, NASA, or SpaceX. Jennifer has volunteered for organizations such as Women in Leadership and Blue Star Moms. She has also worked as a campus aide at the College of Alameda, which had her volunteering at local schools and at the United Airlines outreach event at Livermore Airport. Jennifer impressed the scholarship committee, and we are happy to award her the 2020 Robert L. Hamilton Scholarship.
Thank you so much for your consideration. I really, really appreciate this honor. Thank you.
Well deserved, Jennifer. And now I will pass it on to Anita Ferris, who will announce our next scholarship.
Hi, congratulations, Marcus Espinoza, on being awarded the Thomas E. Leonard Scholarship. Tom would be proud that you received his scholarship. He always had a soft spot for students who had the aviation bug from their early years and then continued on with their schooling in multiple aviation options. Okay, during high school, Marcus volunteered at Aerodynamic Aviation at Reed Hillview. During his schooling at the Aviation School of Maintenance, he continued with aerodynamic and was hired as a mechanic apprentice and is now doing fabric covering and restoring his Citabria. He is also working on his private pilot certificate and soloed this past August. He is close to completing his airframe and power plant certificates and planning to graduate in May 2021. And Marcus says, this scholarship will help me tremendously by relieving some financial stress with paying for school, paying for flight training, buying tools for my career, and being able to move forward to getting back to college to become an aerospace engineer. And Marcus, please consider San Jose State to continue your education. And congratulations again, Marcus. Do you wish to say a few words?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I will be going to San Jose State. I'm planning to. Thanks again. This scholarship will help me out a lot, trying to pursue my dreams ever since I was 8 years old. Thank you.
Okay, now I'll hand it over to John Cabigas.
Thank you, Anita. For our third scholarship winner for tonight, she's a recent graduate in December from San Jose State University with a bachelor's degree in aviation operations with a minor in business. Worked at Tradewinds Aviation for the past 2 years as customer service rep and dispatcher. She also currently works at San Jose State Research Foundation at NASA Ames in the Airspace Operations Laboratory, working on human systems interaction as well as air mobility concepts. And after graduating, she's going to be focusing her attention on finishing up her flight training. And I believe she's currently in Florida trying to finish up her commercial multi-engine and CFI. That way she can start making a little bit of money with all those tickets, right? She's also preparing a package for either the Air National Guard or the Air Force Reserve, whichever one she decides to choose upon. And according to her words, this scholarship will help me achieve my professional goals by allowing me to solely focus on finishing my ratings and continue forward towards my professional goals. So I'd like to present the third and final scholarship awardee, Julia Bradley. Julia, you have 30 seconds to say whatever you want. Congratulations.
Oh, okay. Hi. I just want to say I'm so grateful. I'm sitting in a motel in Florida now. I've been flight training 5 to 6 days a week, which is incredible. And I'm just really grateful to be a part of this community that has been so inclusive and encouraging and supportive. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys for the support.
And that is all I have at this point.
All right, well, I think it's my turn. Let me see if I can get this silly Outlook or this PowerPoint to work the way that I want it to. So my name's Eric Peterson. I'm the current president of the Aero Club of Northern California. And it's my great pleasure this evening to introduce our guest speaker, Jim Clarkson. So tell you a little bit about Jim. He has worked for 31 years as a professional pilot. And in that time, Jim has flown in the Alaska Bush. He has worked for 7 different airlines, including TWA and American Airlines. And he's worked for 7 different corporations. The past 13 years, he's been with Hewlett-Packard and Hewlett-Packard Enterprises, where Jim has fulfilled the role of senior international captain, flying the Gulfstream G5 and the G550. Jim is a graduate of San Jose State University, class of 1990. Until very recently, as many of you heard, he was a co-owner of a Cherokee 6. In the recent past, he and his wife, Jill, who is also a private pilot, created Wings of Achievement to help aspiring business students, single parents working on higher education, and future aviation professionals achieve their goals. Giving back to the community through aviation has been a high priority, and mentoring those interested in learning to fly and those working towards a career in aviation is a longtime passion of his. While Jim and Jill currently live in San Jose, he and his family will soon embark on another grand adventure as they relocate to Montgomery, Texas, which is just a little north of Houston, as he continues his current role with Hewlett Packard Enterprises in their flight department. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jim. Thank you, Jim, very much for coming out this evening.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, well, it's my pleasure to be here, and it's certainly an honor to be speaking today at the Aero Club. Certainly my experience attending the Crystal Eagle dinners in the past, award ceremonies, has been super cool, and I'm just happy to be a part of our virtual world these days. And I would really a shout out to Jennifer and Marcus and Julie. Congratulations on those, and Jennifer, thank you for your service. We do appreciate that very much. So a little bit about me. I'm going to share my screen here and we'll see how well I do. I am, as Eric said, a current Gulfstream pilot. This was one of the first iterations for the Mandalorian, but they decided not to pick me. I'm really, you know, in the grand scheme of things, there are so many people that have done so many things, and I recognize so many great people in not just aviators, but aviation people who are on this call right now. And, you know, I just had some great opportunities and some cool chances to do stuff. And it really pales in comparison to a lot of people. There are some of my friends from Alaska on this call, which is kind of cool. And, you know, we've got warbird pilots. We've got some people who are, you know, near and dear to my heart, who do a great job of flying professionally and getting to do some neat things as well. But I consider myself lucky being able to spend some time in Alaska. And, you know, if I can try to motivate our new scholarship recipients and young people in aviation, which of course, as Eric said, is a big passion of mine, you know, I think perseverance is a great word. And I think, you know, it's never better to, you know, perseverance is Alaska. Perseverance is Alaska aviation. And so I'm excited to just tell a few stories about what happened out there for me. And I'll start with a story when I first got to the bush, which is well after I'd gotten to Alaska. But I wanted to tell this story just because it's powerful. So I had just gotten off the airplane and I was going to be their brand new bush pilot down here in King Salmon, which is just southwest of Anchorage, about 250 miles. And I've been flying in and out of there in the Metroliner, and I was going to be their new guy. And I sat there and looked at the ramp, and I couldn't believe the craziness. This is King Salmon Airport here. And this picture I just pulled off the internet I've never seen the ramp with one airplane on it. I don't know, there must have been 50 that day, and it was blowing direct crosswind and just nasty raining and horrible. And sitting on the ramp was this airplane called a C-46. So this is a Curtiss Condor. I think my buddy Paul, who's on, would call this the box that a DC-3 came in. It's just a massive, wonderful, you know, huge airplane, just a behemoth. And it was hauling gas to probably outstations, and the two pilots, you know, a young guy and an old guy, and covered in oil and grease. And I just thought, now there's a couple of guys that really know their stuff. And as I'm walking down the road, and the chief pilot, you know, he's the station manager, he's going to be my boss. And he's looking at me over his glasses and going, I wanted a bush pilot, and they sent me another Anchorage yuppie. So I'm cruising down the road with this guy. I'm going to this double wide mobile home I'm going to live in, much to my chagrin. And I hear this god awful sound, and I look up, and here's this C-46, and it's in peril. The left engine is on fire and streaming flames and smoke 50 feet. And it's surging, and it's making horrible noises, and it's making an emergency return back to the airport. So just to keep the rest of you here for another 20 or 30 minutes, I'm going to finish that story in a little while. So let's fast forward to the fact that nothing was happening when I graduated from San Jose State, and I couldn't get a job flying anything that burned jet fuel. But I did have a job. and I was happy to have that job, but it took a long time to get out of the piston world. So after my couple of unsuccessful interviews, I got an opportunity to fly out of Anchorage in this beautiful airplane known as the Swear Engine SA-227 Metroliner. But most people called it the sewer pipe or the sewer tube or the San Antonio lawn dart or whatever else. But as you can see, it's tall and lanky. It goes fast, and it did a great job for us. And I thought it was wonderful because it burned jet fuel. So here I am as this brand new guy that probably doesn't know anything. And it was probably an accurate statement, but I sure was happy. And I was going to go to this amazing last frontier. And my parents, being aviation people and being wonderful supporters of my career, they drug my car up behind their RV all the way up the Alaska Highway. And I remember when my mom, school teacher and Stanford grad, gets out of the RV and she says, "Alaska's just big." And I thought, well, you know, that's simple, but quite accurate. So I am now going to fly all around Alaska here. This is the Alaska Peninsula. And since you're aviators, many of you know maps and scale and so forth. But I found it interesting that you could take the state of Alaska and superimpose it over the lower 48, as they like to say up there. And from the tip of the Aleutian chain out to the southeast, it pretty much covers from East Coast to West Coast. It's an expansive and wonderful place for sure. So this was kind of where we were going to fly the Metroliner, or where I was going to get to fly the Metroliner, and I did that a lot. And as I said, there's a few of my Alaska aviator buddies on this call today, and some of them, you know, worked for the same company at the same time doing the same thing. And again, I can't hold a candle to a lot of these guys. They spent a lot of time up there, a lot more time than I did. But what a great camaraderie, and what a great place to make friends. And I just couldn't say enough cool things about it. Except then it started snowing. So 3 seasons in Alaska: July, August, and winter. So this was just a balmy day, and I don't know, probably October or November. And, you know, we'd get a couple, I think I got 1 day or 2 days a week off. I'm flying about 100 hours a month, and I'm so happy I can't even tell you, because I'm looking out that right-hand window and I'm watching that turboprop engine gulping down jet fuel, and I'm building time for the airlines. Except all my buddies who are captains, these young guys that are my captains, and still a lot of them are friends today, they say, "This isn't really an airline, Jim. This is a bush operation. You know, if you're going to be an airline pilot, you're going to got to go build time at an airline if you want to be a major airline pilot and go to the show, whatever. You got to go to the bush. That's the only way you're ever going to succeed here." I said, "I don't know if I want to do that." Incidentally, this is the Conquest, which was neat. We had a contract with, I think it was Alaska Regional Hospital, and we would take terminally ill patients down to Washington State, to Seattle Boeing Field. And although that was sad, it was also a very fulfilling part of my job. So I thought I'd put this slide in here. I got to fly this airplane a little bit doing that. But anyway, oh yes, also this is where we stored the keg whenever we had a party. So this is the berm in the driveway, and it's April, by the way, and the berm is at least 6 or 7 feet tall. So we've been shoveling the driveway all winter, and it's so tall you can't even get the snow up there. I don't even know how we did it. But anyway, I'm digressing, but I'm getting ready to move to the bush, and I'm having a discussion with my dad, and I said, "I just don't think I can do this." And he said, "Well, then don't do it." I said, "Well, you know, but if I go to the bush, then I can come back and be a captain on this Metroliner, and maybe I can build this time I need to get that airline job." And he said, "Well, then go to the bush." And I said, "Well, I don't know. I don't know what I want to do." So I finally decided, no way, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. I'm too cool. I got my uniform. I'm just going to fly my Metroliner and wait for something to happen. And then the boss calls me in and he says, "Your name came up. We need somebody in the bush. What do you think?" And I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll do it." So off I go. I'm off to the Alaska bush. So this is king salmon. This is the Metroliner that I had been flying, and now I'm going to go fly small airplanes around. And this is what I'm going to get to fly. So this is the reason that up until recently I was an owner of a Cherokee 6, because this was an amazing airplane for me, and I enjoyed it so much. But it was still scary because it was time for me to, well, I had to be the PIC. I was sitting in the right seat on an IFR flight plan. Now I got to go fly around all these places I'd never been to. There really wasn't any GPS. And so, I I just had to wing it, no pun intended. So this was kind of my turf. This is the new guy, got to fly the Cherokee all over the place. And as you can see, that's a pretty big stint of area. And you could be gone for 8 hours. And we flew 8 hours a day, almost every day. And we flew 6 days a week. And I was now making, I would later realize that I was making $20,000 or $30,000 a year more than a flight engineer at a major airline. But I didn't know that yet. So of course I was still aspiring to do that, but I was making a decent amount of money, and I was getting to fly all over to these cool places in this airplane. So as you can see, the Cherokee 6, when it's got Tundra tires on it, it sits kind of nose high. So it's not as cool as Paul's P40, but I would have to S-turn. I would have, especially with the load in the back, you couldn't see out. You couldn't see over that long nose, and you really did have to S-turn the airplane so you didn't run into anything. That was kind of fun. But these were 2 airplanes I flew often. Who knows how many hours those airplanes have on them now. One of the things that was neat was to go out and fly to Lake Iliamna, which is off in the distance in this picture. And this is New Halen River, but I don't know if I ever knew that. I had to look it up. I looked on ForeFlight. But this is an amazingly beautiful area, and this lake is massive. I mean, it's like, Great Lakes big. And one of the airports out there was Lake Iliamna International, as we called it. Nice airport. Had a good school. And in the bush, in the outlying areas, the schools are very important to the communities. And if you're hauling materials to an airport, you're most likely supporting the school. So that was pretty cool to do that. So you'd buzz the school or you'd buzz the town, and then that meant somebody had to come out and pick up the stuff. So this was cool. I got to haul about 1,000 pounds of 2x6s one day. And I don't think many people can say that they've gotten to do that. But we didn't even have a yoke in the right-hand side of the panel in any of these airplanes, just because of passenger egress and just because of being able to put more stuff in there. So we didn't have a yoke, and they could jam that airplane full of just about everything. And there was just me and my pilot seat and all this stuff, copper pipe, you name it. Pretty fun. So this is a cool shot of Dutch Harbor. And some of you may have watched Deadliest Catch with Micro over the years. This is where all those big fishing boats were based. And this is actually Alaska 737-200 on approach. And I was out at the end of the runway one day taking some pictures of it. And these guys would get down and stopped in just an amazing amount of time. I couldn't believe it. And I can't remember. I think it's 4,000 feet, but it's got an ocean at each end. And there are several people on the call, as I said, who could probably tell as many stories about flying in and out of there as I can. But it was a pretty exciting place to fly for sure. Another thing to mention is Kodiak. Kodiak is a place where the absolute real bush pilots fly, and that does not really include me. But to give you some reference there, I think there was an F-15, Air Force F-15 that missed the approach to this runway in the 80s, I believe, and didn't follow the correct procedure or whatever happened, but he hit the mountain. So it kind of proves that, to persevere, you got to have some good planning and you got to execute. And even with all those ponies, sometimes that can't get you out of a jam. And Alaska will definitely hand you as many challenges as you could possibly want. So here's an airport vehicle. This is actually one in good shape. This is one that would often service the bush community. So you'd come grinding in your Navajo or your Caravan, and this is what you'd get to unload your packages. I remember when I was brand new, they came over and said, "Hey, you want to go for a ride in the Caravan?" And I thought, well, yeah, I got to get some time in that for sure. Well, I just sat over there with my hands in my lap while this other young bush pilot, yammered on and on about everything. And we get there and I unload 3,000 pounds of soda pop out of the bottom of the airplane. And then we flew home and I sat on my hands. I didn't even get to fly. So what they do is they go to the new guy when he's not flying his Cherokee and they make him the load master of the Caravan. So I learned real quick not to accept those flights. That never worked out. So this is kind of a prelude to one of my main stories. So the Igigik vortex, we call it. The Igigik area had a bunch of these airports all around, fish canneries, fishing villages, and we would bop around between these. And you could be down there for 3 or 4 hours at a time in between. My most productive day would be 8 hours of flying and 32 takeoffs and landings. And I would oftentimes be flying off of, say, Bartlett's Field here, and I would go across the river to the next airport. It'd be about a 2-minute flight. So you'd taxi almost as much as you'd fly. And, you'd get over there and somebody want to come back over here. And then they want to go over there. And at the end of the day, you'd have this little ticket book, which was a sad attempt at keeping track of what you'd just done, and a big giant wad of cash in the other hand of people that had given you money, and you just dump it on the dispatcher's desk and say, okay, I'm going to go have a beer now. And you'd do that 6 days a week, and that was fun. And I was happy and I was comfortable and I knew what I was doing. And then one day they said, oh, we want you to go and to this place far away. And it's past Chignik, which I already thought was far. There's Chignik right here, a place where you have to fly over the water for a few minutes in your single engine airplane with really no choice, no options. You just held your breath and hoped that Lycoming kept on purring. But they wanted me to go to this lodge. And I said, how do I get there? And the chief pilot just looked at me over his glasses and he said, I want you to fly there. I said, well, I know you want me to fly there, but how do I get there? And he said, oh, I'll just go to Rabbit Gulch, make a left at the hill, and then go over to that wreckage of that DC-3, and you make a right up and go up Eagle Creek, and then you can't miss it. It's an old exploration strip, from C-130 oil exploration days. Yeah, sure, okay. So I'm asking everybody, has anybody got GPS coordinates for this? No, you'll be fine. So I head for this place, and I'm grinding along for at least an hour and a half or whatever just to get down there. And the weather's pretty crummy, and I'm getting lower and lower, and I'm kind of scud running. And it finally breaks open, and it's nicer as I turn inland. And I'm flying along going, I don't know where this place is. About that time, I see a Piper Cub. And I'm thinking, all this airspace, all this big giant place, and I've got traffic up here going 60 knots. And I'm slowing down, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing, and he keeps slowing down with me. And I'm thinking, what is going on? And I look down on the river, there's a boat. He's going the other way. And I'm thinking, I don't know, there's an awful lot of activity. I must be getting close. And I look up in the distance, and here's this beautiful lodge. And what appears to be a driveway in the front of it, but it turns out that's the runway. So I kind of overfly this, and I think, I don't know. So I slow down, and I turn final, and I pull in all the flaps and then some more. I mean, I'm just reefing on the handle, and I'm just thinking, I don't know. So I get touched down, and I stop, and I'm just sitting there, and I look over, and here comes this Cub, and he lands, and he kind of taxis past me, and he's waving at me, and he shuts down, and I'm just sitting there with the engine idling, kind of trying to get my pulse under control, my breathing back. And he walks over and he talks through the little window there on the side of the plane, and he says, I couldn't reach you on the frequency. And I looked over, and I didn't have the right one in. I said, yeah, that's because I wasn't on the right one. And he said, you passed the strip. And I just sort of stared at him. He said, you were supposed to land at the big strip. And I said, nothing. And he just stared at me, and he said, you don't know where that is, do you? I said, no, I do not. So he said, follow me. So he jumps back in his Cub and he takes off, and I roll behind him, and I'm flying behind this Cub, and we fly about 2 miles. And then what do you know? Here's this big giant runway that I didn't see because I was looking at boats and I was looking at Piper Cubs, and I was staring at this stupid 300-foot long, it looked like, runway that I was supposed to land on. I think it was about 900 feet. So I am now landing at this place, and there's all my passengers. And it turns out he was shuttling these passengers between the lodge and the big airport in his Cub, and the boat even had one of my passengers. So they were all converging on this bigger runway. And here I am in this tiny little place, and with my big old Cherokee 6. So now I'm where I'm supposed to be. I put the people on and I fly back and I land, and I'm kind of just tired. I'm emotionally wrecked. And the owner of the airline comes walking up to me. And Oren's been flying, in the bush forever. He's a native, Alaska native. And he walks up to me and he says, Jim, I see that you flew into the lodge strip today. And I said, yeah. And he said, yeah, don't do that again. I don't even go in there. So, I was both proud and, unhappy with myself, I guess. But, we all know that as pilots, we have egos, and that was a pretty good ego stroke that day. But I wasn't done. Once I had a line on a job flying a DC-9, I was a short timer in the bush, and I was just getting ready to be done. And by the way, I got to do this a lot. This is fun. Land on the beach, and this is a low tide landing, but just below the glare shield here on this picture is actually the wing of a DC-6 that just continually bobs in the surf. And no one's ever in a hurry to remove airplane wreckage up there. I don't know why, but talk about a reminder about being careful. Every time you line up on this beach, which already has 100 different challenges for you, people and ATVs and fishing lines and all those trucks full of fish and all that stuff. And here's this airplane wreckage. And I don't remember why that wing was there. I don't know. I'm sure an airplane met its peril there. But anyway, you'd fly over the top of that every time you landed. So it was a great reminder. So now I'm getting ready to be done. And by the way, someone else might use that runway too. So once you get out, look both ways for Navajos. So I'm getting ready to be this DC-9 pilot. And I challenge all you modern G1000 pilots to take a load of this thing. Don't even ask me what any of it does. Probably half of it's not hooked up to stuff. But I will say that I was very excited about moving on now. But what was left for me was an event in Igigik. I landed and I was dropping off some hunters, and basically the host at the field kind of lost his mind. I think he was drugged out, and he ends up attacking my passengers. And I mean, I got shotguns and I got rifles, I got ammo, I got these big hunters, and there's fights and bloody faces and rocks being thrown, and it's turning into a giant melee. It's terrible. And I'm now loading everything back in the airplane, and I'm trying to get my passengers in there, and I'm trying to get off this field to get away from this crazy lunatic who's screaming and running around with his shredded jeans and no shoes in the middle of this Alaskan bush runway. And he rips all the antennas off my airplane. I mean, he just walks up and rips them all off the plane. So we pile everybody in and we split and we take off and we fly to the next place. And I tell the station manager, I don't have any radios, I don't think. And I'm just going to go back to King Salmon with my people, which is a tower airport. So I flew out there and I got my first, and to this day only, green light from the gun, clear to land. Out there in the middle of nowhere, at Alaska airport, I get this green light, land the plane, you're good to go. So pretty an amazing amount of exciting things, happened in just a summer, really. I mean, I spent about 5 months out there. in the bush. And I mean, there's so many more stories, and there's so many stories in this room from other aviators that could share as well. So, you know, it was a true pleasure, and I was happy to move on, but I was also gonna miss it. And it's neat that I still have that connection to so many pilots who live up there or live in Seattle and fly for Alaska Airlines or whatnot. So I eventually made it to American or TWA rather, and then American. And I just want to close by saying that, you know, once I got an opportunity to fly the Gulfstream, you know, I had a little girl at this point, and you know, it was important for me to spend as much time with her, and so we were able to obtain a Cherokee 140, and I could fly back and forth between here in San Jose and Columbia, where she lived with her mom. So this became her little airliner, and then that turned into the bigger airliner. So this is the airplane we spoke of earlier, beautiful 4143 whiskey. It turned into Chloe's stretch airliner. And this is the little girl now. You need the oil changed, you just drag her out to the airport and point her in the right direction, and off she goes. So this is the Gulfstream, and now on our second iteration with the G550. And you know, it's been a great career, and I'm super happy that I've spent the last 13 years flying for a major corporation here, and getting to fly all over the world. And again, a lot of people on the call that have done an amazing amount of flying, and really some just as challenging or more challenging flying than I have. But you know, I'm thankful for, even though it was an interesting road, you know, it was fulfilling. And incidentally, the C-46, with its flames shooting out and the smoke shooting out and the wrong engine in op because the cross one was from the left, and all the bad things that were happening. And I ran out to the road and watched these two pilots slick this thing on in the touchdown zone, which obviously is not even a requirement in an emergency, but they couldn't have done a better job. It looked like it was no big deal for them. So nobody hurt, nobody scratched. And during my subsequent training in the Cherokee for the next 2 weeks, every time we took off, I looked down and saw that C-46 sitting there with a giant pool of oil underneath it. It took them forever to get that thing fixed, as they brought an engine in from somewhere. But that was the end of that story. But it's not the end of everybody's story. And so I thank you all for listening to my trials and tribulations of just a short time in Alaska, but an amazing, wonderful experience, and a place that I met so many great people that I still get to call my friends and my colleagues in this industry. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim, very much for taking the time to put that together and tell us a few stories of your time up in Alaska. I know I find that very fascinating. It's so different from the experiences I've had flying around the lower 48. And I just can't imagine what a fantastic experience. And also for some of you, what a great opportunity, you know, if that's the direction you want to go. I know there's one young man on here. Where did he go? Carlos, who is one of my scouts from Troop 170, and he has a very, very high fascination with aviation. And that's certainly a direction that you could look to go if that was something that interested you. Michelle is on. Michelle was going to take any questions that you all might have. If you do have a question, please put it in the chat. There's a button on your screen somewhere that will say chat. And if you click on that, it'll open up a window off on the side. You can type your question in there. Michelle will take them and read them to our speaker, Mr. Clarkson. I'm going to start off by asking a question that I had when you were showing some pictures of the charts showing where you were flying. And I'm just kind of curious if, you know, in one of those, you had this long stretch, you know, it's just a straight line, obviously, that you drew between the two airports. And a large stretch of that was over open water. And I'm curious if you actually flew over open water in that Cherokee 6, or if you actually more closely followed the shoreline.
So we absolutely stayed over the land whenever possible. Ironically, the water was a great escape route. So as you flew into deteriorating conditions, which often happened, you would at some point possibly fly into IFR conditions that you could no longer, you could no longer maintain an adequate distance to the ground. And when I say adequate, you might already be a couple hundred feet AGL. And so you say, well, that's my hard deck. I'm not going any lower than that. And on a couple occasions, you'd fly into these conditions and you would just make a hard right, if you were southbound, and you'd fly out over the water and you'd mark your time, and then you'd start a 180 and you'd start your descent, knowing that you were out over the water and there was no terrain. And you could oftentimes pick up the side of the hill, side of the mountain, side of the land, and reverse course. And of course, you were going to skedaddle back to the conditions you had just left, and you knew hopefully they were still good enough. And that was it. That was called poking your nose in it, and you went as far as you could go, and then you'd go back to whatever divert station you had in mind and get some gas and say, not today, it's not going to happen.
So how low would you get in that sort of a situation?
Well, summertime there were some pretty nice days, and I was lucky enough to fly during a lot of nice days. But I mean, routinely you didn't, if you're going a short distance, you might climb up 500 feet or 1,000 feet just because there was so much cool stuff to see. And it's the tundra, so it's mostly flat, but it's spongy, so you're probably going to flip over anyway. So you're really, you're not ever in gliding distance of an airport there. So you just kind of bop along at low altitudes. If you were going to maybe fly for an hour and a half, you might climb up to 3,500 or so, or whatever you decide. But oftentimes you just stay down low, fly down the river. And I've got some video. I used to stick my camera up on the glare shield and fly down the river, and I don't know, all that stuff's on some weird 3-inch disc, and I don't even know how you'd even watch it now, but it was high-tech video camera back then. And one of these days I'll figure out a way to get that transferred to some other media, because it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat to watch.
Cool. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And you can take those discs over to Costco. They'll transfer them for you. They got a pretty good rate for it.
All I got to do is find them.
That's right.
It might be in Texas when I finally find them.
Unpacking. Michelle?
Hi, yes. Okay, let's take over the question and answer portion. So one question that I have on here is from John, and it's, what is your one biggest recommendation for our 3 new scholarship recipients to be successful in their careers?
Well, I think if we've all learned that, we can certainly get blindsided. We can certainly get an amazing thing happen to us that nobody expected. Certainly 2020 was proof of that. The reason I tout my 14 flying jobs is that, just like anybody, I'm a survivor. I land on my feet because I have to. And I think if there was any advice I could give, and I know there's teachers on this call, there's people that work with students a lot, and I think they would agree with me that, you do persevere, and you hang in, you don't give up, and you're going to have some roller coasters. You're going to have some broadsides, and you are not ready for, but we're people with we've got some extra gene or something. We're all aviation nuts, and that's a different thing than a lot of people, but we're driven, and we're type A personality, and we're smart, and we will survive. And so I think the one thing that I would say is, even when it feels like it's never going to happen, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen when you least expect it. You're going to end up with a better opportunity than you thought. But at the end of the day, just remember my dad who's on the call also, he's always told me that, you know, you were looking for a job when you got the one you have now. So get a job, and it's a lot easier to find one at that point. And hang in there as best you can, and you'll be successful. I guarantee it. It'll happen.
All right, thank you. Our next question comes from Brian, and it's, what skills did you learn in the bush that you've taken to and utilized at your job as a corporate jet captain?
You know, this is something that was bestowed on me by, I think, you know, a lot of the guys I was flying with up there, especially in the Metroliner, some of them were my age or just barely older. And, you know, they were just amazing aviators. But I think what I took from them and the things that I think they wanted to make sure I had before I went out to the bush myself was the ability to have not only a plan B, but maybe a plan C and a plan D. You know, we teach a lot now about, you know, with our SMS and our mitigation of risk and all the things that we all have buzzwords for now. But back then we didn't call them anything. They were just, you know, plan ahead and have some way to keep yourself alive. And it really goes to anything you do, right? Driving a car or flying an airplane down here or flying an airplane wherever. And so I think what I got from flying up there was, you know, if this isn't going to work and our alternate isn't going to work, what are we going to do after that? And why not discuss that? Why not have a plan and then a plan and then another plan? And, you know, not to the point where you're going crazy, but you got to have a few more alternative options. And that was evident right away.
Well, thank you for that. Okay, so I don't see any more questions in the chat, but I would like to invite those on the call. If you do have a question you want to say out loud, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll look. So I'll give a minute to look through if anyone has any more questions for Jim.
I think I see one there, Michelle, that says, is there one type of flying job or rating you didn't have the chance to do or complete, but you wanted to try? Well, there's a long list of those. But, you know, something that's really cool that Alaska did for me, I wrote an article when I was at TWA about getting the jump seat on a DC-6. It's a Northern Air Cargo DC-6. And I wrote an article and put it in the Airline Pilot magazine, and it got published with some cool photos. And one day, some guy out of the blue calls me up and he says, "Hey, I'm starting this magazine and I want you to write for it." It's called Northern Pilot. And so I started writing from the first issue all about my exploits up in Alaska. And one day he sends me an email and he says, "You don't have a float rating. I mean, you flew up in Alaska, you didn't have a float rating. Now, how am I supposed to put you on as a managing editor? What respected person doesn't have a float rating, you know?" So he sent me to Kenmore Air and I got a float rating, and then I got to fly the Beaver on floats, which, you know, Harrison Ford had just filmed 6 days, 7 nights, and he'd done a bunch of training there. And so I thought that was pretty cool. And so that was one rating I did get because I was up in the bush, and one rating I did achieve from having experiences up there. But, you know, I'm always looking to do something new and exciting. So there's definitely a long list of things that I still want to do.
Very cool. Okay, it looks like a couple more questions popped up in the chat. So this question is, what was more harrowing, flying in the bush or flying across the country in a Cessna 310?
So thanks, Brian. So one of the last speaking engagements I had was with Brian Schiff, where we talked about an exploit of flying a Cessna 310. Talk about two guys that didn't know what they didn't know. And we flew it back here to San Jose. And that was a pretty harrowing experience. And that's for another day. But I would have to say, yeah, that one probably takes the cake, actually. I mean, I scared myself more than a few times up there, but I mean, at least with the 310 flight, I could just blame him. So I'm going with that one.
Okay, and the next question is, how did you get into the G5 job? I'm also curious about that too.
So, I have always had at least one friend that could find me a job, and oftentimes it was the same friend. And so one day, a buddy of mine, Rick, who's on the call, I think tonight, he says, "Hey, I'm out here at HP, and this is a really cool place, and you should come and work here." So I interviewed about 14 times, and they didn't hire me. And then a couple years later, he had a little more pull, and he called me back and said, "Hey, there's some more spots here. Why don't you come out and give it another shot?" So, I was by then I don't know, I was probably a 12,000-hour pilot, and these Gulfstream jobs are, they usually hand them out to the old guys, the guys that that complain the most about flying across the time zones. So I had an opportunity back in 08, and I was largely in part to Rick. So to him, I thank him. And several of my former HP colleagues are on the call as well. So it's great to see them. But that was truly going to the show for me in terms of the corporate world. I was proud as ever to fly TWA with many people who are here with us tonight, and Rick was one of them, actually. And that was a wonderful thing to achieve it, prior to 30 years old. But the G5 and the G550 are, to me, are really the pinnacle of corporate aviation. And I'm sure there's a few drivers out there flying the competition that might say otherwise, but I'm going to hold my ground. But it is an amazing airplane. Very thankful to be driving it around.
This next question is, since you were an expert at lumber delivery, did you consider or go the cargo route?
Well, after watching that C-46 full of gas try and crash and explode all over the place on my first day in the bush, I was and honestly, I did my fair bit of cargo flying up there. But yeah, I was pretty much aspiring to be that airline pilot and to fly my normal schedule, and so I stuck with that route. But yeah, I am very proud of that picture and very proud of that flight, and I'm sure there's some room on a school somewhere that I helped build by hauling that stuff where I did.
All right. Do we have more questions? I don't see any more in the chat. I'm going to scroll through and look at everyone's beautiful faces here on our Zoom. Oh, here we go. Another one. All right. So Jim, was the airline job what you expected it to be?
I get that question a lot, and I think a lot of corporate pilots get that question as well. Many of us have had the opportunity to do both jobs. The airline job for me was everything. It was the end all, and we all thought that we had it made, and it turns out that wasn't the case. Through the world's airline mergers, sometimes there's some fallout, and that's where I was. I was in the falling out part. So it was very fulfilling while it lasted. And they're very different jobs now. The difference between the airline job and the corporate job are very different. And I think I found my niche. I think this is definitely more my style. But while I was there, I did enjoy it. And what I like about it is that those of my friends that are still doing it are enjoying it as well. So that makes me happy.
That's wonderful to hear. Are there more questions for our amazing guest speaker tonight?
I think we have time for one more. Bunch of quiet people out there.
I know. Let's see. I don't see any more questions in the chat. Does anyone want to raise their hand and ask Jim any questions?
Well,
Oh, hi, John. All right, John, go on ahead and unmute yourself.
What's been your favorite airplane so far?
Well, I know this is going to sound funny, but, and again, we do have some aficionados on the call that are true warbird pilots, but I did get a chance to fly the P-51 thanks to my mom buying me an hour in one once. And that was probably the most exciting, of course. Who wouldn't want to do that? But that was an amazing experience at Stallion 51 in Orlando, Florida, and getting to be hands-on for an hour and doing so many maneuvers that I don't think I'd ever done or have done since in any airplane. So that was a pretty cool experience. But you know, as far as every day, you know, the Gulfstream, the 757, Boeing 75 is still in my heart one of the coolest airplanes ever. And I got to fly the CRJ 70, the middle-sized one, and for a while as a captain. And those are my top three for sure. Those were all amazingly wonderful airplanes to fly.
All right, anyone else? Thank you, John, for that question. Oh, Marcus, okay, go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hi. What's the one airplane you haven't flown yet, but you really want to fly?
Oh, that's kind of a good question. Thanks a lot, Marcus. Way to stump me at the end of the show. None of this was prearranged, just so you know. You know, this sounds kind of funny, but and this is for Bob Reinhardt out there because he has a contact. But I would love to fly the AirCam because I would love to fly a twin engine float plane. I just think that's cool. I think it would be cool to have that rating. And I mean, who has that? Who can say that? Plus all those cool National Geographic shots that they get from those things. I mean, what a sense of freedom. So anyway, if I had an extra 150 grand, I might want to get one of those. But that would be probably one of the airplanes I'd love to fly. Thank you, Marcus.
Okay, one last run through our pictures. Anyone raising their hand wanting to ask a question? No. Okay, well, that will wrap up our question and answer portion. Everyone, please give Jim a round of applause. That was a really great talk. I really enjoyed it. We'll have to invite you back next time. And it looks like in the chat that you and Brian have another story you can tell about human factors. I know that's something that we should all be striving to learn about. So we'll definitely have to talk offline and hear that story.
Absolutely. I suggest we do that.
Great. So let's see. Eric, I'll wait for you to bring back up the presentation. But while we're, oh, sorry.
Yep, sorry, that's okay. Go right ahead.
I was just going to say, while we are bringing back up the presentation, I would, first of all, thank you all so much for coming out and supporting our scholarship recipients. This means a lot, well, to us all, but especially to me. I'm a previous scholarship recipient and I'm on the board, and I know I really appreciated having a group like this that cares about us and our careers. And so I just really want to thank you all, for those of you who have donated and who will continue to donate in the future. I just want to give a personal thank you to that.
Michelle, I'd like to point out that the link, once again, just for those of you who are interested, the link to our GoFundMe page is in the chat. And all of those funds do get circulated right back around to this program. Every year we give away $6,000 a year in scholarships. Part of, mostly we have succeeded in doing that through our silent auction program, but we also have an endowment which backs that up whenever we happen to run short. So if you're interested, willing, and able, we certainly would take your money and put it to really good use.
Yes, I agree. Let's see. And we also have several positions for board members. So if you're interested, please contact us. You can contact me or Anita. I also help manage our Facebook page, so please feel free to reach out that way. You can get a hold of us there. And I just want to thank you all again for coming out and supporting our scholarship recipients. Can we also give a round of applause to our scholarship recipients? And can, for those of you, let's see, Marcus and Julia and Jennifer, can you just wave that way I can see you on the, there you are. Thank you so much. We're really excited and we can't wait to see what you all have to do in your careers. We're very excited that we were here to help support you and get you on your way. And we hope you all found the program rewarding and interesting. And I just want to thank you all again for your support, because as you can see, your support is what helps us stick through this career, even though we do love it. And a lot of us are type A personalities. I agree with Jim on that. So thank you all again, and I hope you have a wonderful night. Stay healthy, stay safe out there. And I know one of these days we'll get to all meet in person again. But thank you all for joining us for our virtual presentation. Have a wonderful night.